Hey, Nathan, thanks for joining us today. As way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure, Brian. Thanks so much. So I'm Nathan Foreman. I do not live in a cathedral, Brian. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm currently an account director at a company called Final Site. Final Site is the preferred digital communications firm for public school districts, private faith-based schools. So we build websites, we do marketing communications, and so forth. And I actually work in the school admin division. So school admin is the kind of the leading enrollment management solution for private K-12 schools. So we handle inquiries in the application process and the whole enrollment process. And we actually just joined the Final Site family. We're super excited about it. We joined in March, and now we've got really an amazing solution that takes kind of the whole marketing journey of driving traffic for our school customers. And then once they have families that want to inquire and want to apply for their kids, they move into that school admin environment. So we're really just that whole front end piece, funnel management, as you would say. It's amazing that admissions directors and marketing communication folks at private schools and school districts, they're sales folks like us. So it's kind of nice to they have a different customer, but it's nice to work with those partners of ours because they can really relate to what we do, because they do the same thing, but they're just trying to get parents.
That's kind of a tough space, though, isn't it? Because of budgets and timeframes and.
It is, and particularly where I come from, I've been at school admin for about 2 years. Previously, I worked mostly in sales management. So I worked for, larger education technology companies, been doing it for, over, 10 years. And when I joined school admin, I actually said, you know what, I need to get back to basics. Like I went back, now I'm a field rep, right? And I'm loving it. It's like, it's kind of neat to kind of go back from like, coaching and helping a team to like, just kind of owning my own number. And in particular, you mentioned the tough time, it is tough. It got tougher with COVID for sure. Because there was just so much uncertainty. Are the kids going back? For private schools, their budgets were tight, particularly Catholic schools, which are the ones that I work with in Catholic dioceses. There was just so much uncertainty that it did get pretty tough there, even tougher than it was previously. Yeah.
And did you enjoy management, or was this just something you wanted to do different, or were you burnt out on the leadership side, or?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say I was burned out. I was kind of looking for another opportunity. I knew school admin well from being in the industry, so I've been in education technology since 2007. I like to joke that I'm like Johnny Cash. I've been everywhere in the end. Like I've worked for a lot of different companies in that space, right? I've been everywhere. But no, an opportunity came through a former colleague of mine. He said, "Hey, would you ever consider this?" And so, I love, what I love about the management part is really the coaching part, and I love the process and the metrics, right? Like you really get a good feeling when you've got those metrics just the way you want them in terms of, pipeline generate, all the things that sales managers do. And I love that part. One of the things I was missing that I found when I was talking to my colleague who kind of brought me into the company was, just that customer interaction. Getting in front of people. And I would go out with my reps and I would, I'd meet with schools but I just wasn't doing it a lot. And now, I have like, 2 to 3 meetings a day, and it's just talking to people and, what's going on. And especially in COVID, like, tell me everything. I want to know how things are going, And so I've really been enjoying it. And if I get back into sales management, I think, boy, I'll be just so set by kind of reminding myself what it's like, boots on the ground, carrying the bag,
Because it is kind of easy to forget that after a while, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Especially in like your space where it's like, why aren't they doing it? You said they were going to do this. Like
Right.
Because I think the amount of things that you control in your space is less.
Yeah.
Because there's no profit motive. It's a lot of politics, a lot of consensus that has to take place. And
well, governance too, right? You're 100% right. You've got, I think one of the things that when I first came into the education technology space, I wasn't the area that I came into, I wasn't familiar with at all. And one of the things I really loved about it is it was really high tech. Like education technology software is a very high technology business. And even back in 2007 with the company I started with, I loved the high tech aspect of it because I had owned and co-founded an internet company that built websites, and I'd worked in technology for a while. But the philanthropic nature of it, the fact, we were on the finance side for private schools. And back in 2007, 2008, when the bubble, that was another really tough time on private schools. Families just didn't have enough money to send their kids there. So I took it upon it as my mission to help schools sustain themselves, right? And so, but yeah, I mean, it is tough, but these folks are so mission driven, right? That, I almost had to kind of change my thinking. I've been in sales for nearly 30 years, but I almost had to kind of move to like empathy based selling, if you will, right? Tell me what's going on, like really thinking of what's going on in these folks, world. And so it really, I caught the bug, and I haven't looked back since. I've definitely stayed in this industry because it's a fast moving industry. It's very innovative, and it still has that kind of philanthropic bent to it, if you will.
Yeah. So I guess you get kind of that helper's high, that feeling like you're part of changing the world for the better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And when you were in sales leadership, what viewpoint did you have on salespeople? What made a great salesperson in your space?
I think part of being a good sales leader is understanding that the sales process is an ongoing, evolution, right? It's almost like science, where you think something's one way in one day, and then the next day you're like, oh, I just tweaked a number, and now I need. So I think the most successful sales folks that I worked with were always looking for help, right? Like always kind of hungry for like, tell me how did that go? What's your feedback? And I think that you have to have a lot of trust in that relationship to kind of bear yourself out there, right? And so, creating responsibility of a sales leader is creating an amazing process that doesn't get in the way of the things they need to do, is easy to follow and easy to measure, so that you both as a team can be evolving and improving over time. And so you have to have a certain willingness, trust, and openness as a rep to be able to enter into that kind of a relationship, right?
Yeah, because I always viewed it as it's this paradox. Like when you're in front of the client, you can't have all this doubt. You can't be thinking to myself, what am I doing wrong? No,
Yeah.
You have to be like very confident, well thought out process and execute it. But off field, when you're not in front of a client, you should be questioning, where are you? Where to take it next? How could you have done it better? And kind of the game film, because we don't get that much practice like we do in other sports, other activities.
Mm-hmm.
It's like no one's, hey, I'm going to go upstairs and practice selling.
Right. Yep.
You don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
And I even have a hard time trying to get reps to write stuff down.
Yeah.
And it's like, can you memorize a chessboard? You just, how many squares are there? What do you mean? It's like, I don't need to, it's right there. It's like, yeah, but your sale is kind of in your head.
Right.
There's no sales board.
Right.
You have your CRM, but it's not that detailed. It's in the process. Are you a process person?
I'm a big process person.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And it's a combination. I know that you'll think this is just obvious, but I went to college for music. I studied jazz performance, trumpet, and music production. So of course you can see the straight line right to education technology sales was
obvious.
But I will say that one thing that being a budding jazz musician, I learned from it was just the improvisational aspects of that kind of career track. And so I think the best combination is like you said, having the confidence, doing your homework to know the process well enough to when you're on your feet, you can improvise a little bit, you can ebb and flow and you can respond, but you've always got to be kind of touching on those points of your process, right? You've always got to be kind of, it doesn't matter how you say it, you do have to figure out what the compelling issue is,
Yep.
or you're just having a nice conversation and you've made a new friend. And there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately what we have to do is figure out, is there a compelling issue, quantifying it for folks that never really thought of it that way, to quote the Challenger selling methodology.
Yeah.
And then understanding their willingness to make a change and wanting to actually use you to make that change, right? Now, those are easy things to memorize, but you're not going to have a very productive conversation unless you're willing to improvise around some of those things. And there's going to be different riffs in every meeting. And that's why different sets in jazz are never going to be exactly the same, right?
Well, I love that background because sales is a performance, much like
Mhm.
playing music is.
Yep.
How well you think you're doing at it is one opinion. How well the audience thinks you're doing, that's the opinion that matters.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and to become good at any music instrument, you've got to take feedback,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you record it and then listen to it later, or you have an instructor, which I'm sure you did for years.
Years. Oh yeah. Yep. Totally. Yep. And it's funny too, when talking about this, like I think I might have even commented on one of your posts. We were talking about how do you prepare for the performance of your, of your next meeting or whatever. And I remember, I think it was on your blog on LinkedIn. I remember saying, back in the day when my early sales years in like the early 90s, I'd be going up in the elevator to a client meeting. And I would start humming to myself the old, I don't know if I'm older than you, I might be aging myself, but the old Tonight Show theme, right? And so as I'm going, and if there were other people in the elevator, I'd do it in my head. But if there were, I would, if they weren't, I'd hum to myself or whatever. And then I'd almost view the elevator doors opening as the curtain opening, right? I'd be like, dun, 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 and that would just kind of psych myself up and remind myself that, hey, you're there to do a job, and there's certain process that you're going to follow, but ultimately this is about creating trust and a friendly environment, people liking you, and that only comes out when you're looking at this as like more of a performance in a lot of ways, right?
Well, it is whether you would accept it or not.
Right.
You don't have to believe it.
Right.
In the
Yeah.
same way, when you do an audition, you don't have to treat it like a performance.
Right.
But the people in the audience certainly do.
Yeah.
And our clients are like, they'd be happy with a nice conversation.
Yeah. Right.
But that doesn't mean they're not going to buy anything. To
Right.
buy something, you have to dig up a problem, talk about it, make them realize there's a solution that fits it, and this is how we can evaluate it and then justify it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And too many people, I think, today look at it as, oh, I just know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, knowing it and doing it are huge.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
think
brought up,
about like when you played a song. How many times did you practice it?
oh yeah, hundreds. Oh, you would just, you go into what we used to call the woodshed, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then before the performance, do you have a sound check, or do you just get off the phone and walk out there?
Right. Yeah.
There's a sound check, there's a warm up, there's a process,
Mm-hmm.
and that we overlook in sales. But the people who are really good at it have that musician performer mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you took feedback as a performer, as a musician, you didn't say, oh, Nathan's bad or Nathan's good. It's, oh, this is how I become better.
Yeah. And for musicianship, that's 100% right. Right. I mean, there were certain times when John Coltrane would step off the stage and just be like, ugh, and you're like, are you kidding? It's not what he wanted to do, and he wanted to do more. And so you're chasing it a lot of the time, by trying to get better and better and practicing more and more. I mean, you brought up an analogy that I just think is so important, and that's like watching the film,
Yeah.
right? And that's, I think, one thing, COVID was, pretty tough. It was tough on salespeople, particularly because we couldn't travel. And so this became the format where we had to kind of entertain, right, if you will, and really get to the bottom of pain and everything else. And it was challenging. But if you were to look at bright spots or silver linings, um, many people use systems that take transcripts or video recordings of your meetings. And so I've just seen a substantial uptick. I mean, I used to feel so uncomfortable watching myself, right? Back when we would record the Zoom meetings or whatever, and they were few and far between, but I'm so used to it now. And I'm just, I shoot it to my manager now and just say, hey, take a look. Where are the gaps, right? Like, where could I have maybe been a little clearer? And that's almost becoming, to a lot of folks, like second nature, no matter what system you're using. If you're recording your meetings, and again, this gets back to the vulnerability, right? You have to have a team that you trust to be able to open yourself up to that kind of, feedback. And you got to just leave your ego at the door and know that, if you trust the people you're working with and your managers, that they're ultimately just trying to make you better. And ultimately you want to be better.
Of
And
course
so
you do.
we're looking at tape. We're looking at tape now, which is awesome,
Yeah, yeah. And that's it. I do it as soon as I end the interview. I upload the video to YouTube, and I take the audio file and put it into um, otter.ai, and it'll take the audio and turn it into text and map the audio with it.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I'll see the talk to listen ratio, right? Which I hope is much more leaning to the guest than to me.
Well, it's not a problem with me. I think you found out.
You're very good with it. And then I'll kind of see how the flow went. Was it too fast, too slow, or were I getting into kind of the distinctions that you have?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really powerful.
And you also mentioned something, and we talked about the improvisation and the balancing act between process and just natural flow, right? And your instinctive, way around certain objections, or whatever. I do, though, feel that there are, certain things that you really need to follow. You mentioned that, like, maybe the person you're meeting with the first time, just maybe their expectation is just having a conversation. They have no idea that this is going to turn into any kind of evaluation whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
And so part of the process of, you need to figure out a compelling reason why they should keep talking to you and maybe how you could help them. But they also need to be consistently reminded that they are entering an evaluation process, right? And so at the same time, I'm trying to think nimbly on my feet. I'm also laying the groundwork for bringing them in and shepherding them in and guiding them, being their guided tour of an evaluation of a process that may lead to a no or a not yet. Hopefully it'll lead to a yes. And so process is critically important, particularly around evaluation plans, just being a good a tour guide. Boy, I mean, everybody watching would probably be like, oh yeah, well, duh. But like, next steps, I'm just so surprised at how little we focus on that. And my talk track for that is when I'm setting up, and this is very Sandler, but when I'm setting up my upfront contract, right? I'm saying, listen, I'm going to have to ask a favor of you, and I hope you agree. But if I don't schedule my entire life, the whole thing unravels. And more times than not, the people I'm talking to, which are like school people, right? They're like, oh no, we get it. Like they get the scheduling of their whole lives, right? I say, okay. So I'm going to ask that after every conversation we have, we just do a little check-in, and it's going to be 5 to 10 minutes. And that's going to move us to the next step. And we'll be tracking our progress to the end of this, evaluation, and hopefully we'll become partners. But boy, scheduling those next steps according to a kind of an ironclad, transparent evaluation plan, that's what gets you out of, I won't say bad deals, but deals that are going to go nowhere earlier. And that's really where you can have a very effortless, non-stress evaluation with a partner, where at the end, I've had more people say, thank you for keeping such an eye on this process, because I've got so much going on. It was nice to know that you would just kind of run it for us, right?
And that's it. And how you did that was so natural, and you didn't sound like a salesperson. And and,
Excellent.
and that is the biggest compliment you can get as a salesperson.
Yeah. Oh no, I love it. Yep. If you didn't
Because
see my light, if my lighting might have hid it, but I was blushing a little bit. No, I appreciate. Yeah, appreciate it.
right, because if you it took you a while to work that flow up, because you made it about your flaw that if I
Right.
don't manage my calendar, this stuff will slip and I'll feel bad about it.
Yeah.
So they're
Yep.
kind of helping you. And most reps think, oh, I'll just follow up with them. Because I hate that word, because it's like there's nothing there. You assume that they know what they're doing, that they have tons of stuff to do, but your stuff is so important.
Hmm.
And all you're
Yeah.
doing is it's a cadence,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep. It's the structure, right? I'm married to a private school teacher. She's a So my life is definitely structured, and which I love. And but she's a theater director, so she talks about scaffolding, right?
Yes.
Scaffolding the whole thing. Now that doesn't mean like you have to have scaffolding in to build a beautiful building. Just look behind me, my Zoom background, right? Like there has to be some sort of foundation, and then you can kind of go from there. But there's definitely got to be some structure there, and then it's just a matter of, like I said, going back to the empathetic, empathy based sales of just, how would I be receiving this same message, right? And putting
Right.
yourself in their shoes. And you said something really important, which is like, they've got 100 things going on. Like anybody you're talking to has 100 things going on. And I have a funny brief story, if you don't mind. But I
Okay.
walked into a school 10, 15 years ago with one of my reps. And we were sitting there waiting. We were meeting with the principal from this private Catholic school. And we're just kind of wondering, like, he was about 5, 10 minutes late. And so we're sitting there, and all of a sudden down the hall, we see this guy walking down the hall with like his shirt, kind of like he had taken off his button down, he's in his undershirt. He's got an axe in his hand, and he's walking down the hall. And we're just like, well, this will be
Shining.
interesting, right? Like,
And you put the rep in front of you.
right. It's like, Dennis, I think we need to get out of here. No, but he said, hey, he's like, hey, gentlemen, I'm so sorry. We had a storm yesterday, as you guys probably found, and we had one of the branches of our tree drop on the power line. So I had to go down and chop it down and make sure our power to go. And I'm like, these people have so much more going on than you even realize. And so you always have to be thinking, and particularly like even callbacks, right? I've had people call me back, and I've been kind of angry and like, why won't this guy call me back? And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, I'm so sorry, we had someone pass away at the school. And then you feel like a total jerk, because you should have been thinking about, like, it's not just about you. Maybe there's other stuff, going on. And if you've planned a good process and they're not responding, there probably is something else going on. So you just have to kind of cool your jets and keep filling your pipeline and keep moving it forward, right?
And what's kept you in this space? Because you're clearly talented and have abilities, and there's a lot of products out there that are probably easier to sell and customers that are more anxious to buy and well funded.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm typecast per se, because I do love what I do and I love the company that I work for. But,
Yeah.
when you've got 20, 30 plus years in sales, of which, over a decade in education sales, like I just know so many people, right? And
Yeah.
so it is a little bit difficult to say, oh, now I'm going to go and sell this software that enables you to find the best restaurant in town, or what, you know what I mean? Like it just would be hard in at the stage of my career to kind of like veer into other spaces. But I'm open to, it's so interesting because like people say, well, you used to have the IBM, like the 30-year career at IBM, and now the average is like 6 years or something at the same company, or that's at the top level, right? And maybe more like 3. So, I'm open to different challenges and experiences and what have you. But I do know a lot of people in the space. They're great people that I've met with. And then there is something about, back when we were going into buildings and having meetings, um, going and meeting with a school that just, desperately needs more enrollment. And you walk down the halls and it's recess time and the kids are kind of running down the halls, and you're just like, I got to help this school. You know what I mean? Like, so there's also, and I have a daughter, she just graduated Syracuse not too long, like a couple of weeks ago. And so her education to me at the time was the most important thing, right?
Absolutely.
And so, helping schools with sustainability and with marketing and with lead generation, they just don't know how to do this stuff. So, like I said, going back to my original entry into ed tech. It's like, it's almost philanthropic. So it does my heart good. And
Yeah.
it's also high tech, and I love that too. So I think I'm here for the long haul. Yeah.
And how have you coached reps on empathy-based selling? Because it is so critical, because people, that's how you build trust.
Hmm.
And that's how you get out of the rep zone and get into the let's talk about fixing this zone.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to think it's kind of funny. I'm going to say something very mechanical and transactional. Um, but if you don't have a full enough pipeline, you're going to fall back on bad, desperate habits.
Yeah, naturally.
And
Survival.
so my advice is to almost not really teach empathy, because I look at that as a quality in a person, no matter what. But it's almost like, what do we need to do? What are the types of conversations we need to have? How are we segmenting our customer base? And are we sending appropriate messages? Are we providing appropriate social proof? Right? You don't want to independent schools, Catholic schools, Christians, they all kind of they're all in their different
A lot of
groups, right?
schools.
Right. So, so social proofing, a Catholic school with an elite, independent school, it just doesn't, they're going to be like, we're not like that. We don't have a wait list. What do so, so that's important. So the point is that, like, you need to really work on the fundamentals, right, of prospecting. What are you saying? Who are you targeting? Right. How many touches are you completing? And so when you have a full pipeline, listen, the best in the business have, like, at least the best in our business has about a 40% close rate, which is phenomenal. I mean, that's a huge, you'd be happy with 20-25% in a lot of different industries, but that still means that 60% of the people that you're talking to aren't going to buy from you.
Yep.
So you need to have a full enough pipeline to where you feel confident you're going to hit your quotas and your goals. And if you feel confident, you're more relaxed, you're more thoughtful, you don't get into desperation mode, right? And so I like to do a lot of the pre-work of just making sure that we're doing the right things, hitting our numbers, hitting our goals mechanically, to where you can have the confidence to be like, you know what, I'm not going to go overboard pressuring this guy. He's just not ready. He's just not a buyer yet. So I'm going to build that relationship for the future, and I'm going to go on to the other 40, prospects I have. And that's when you can kind of sit back and really analyze what's going on with this person. What are their challenges? What are they struggling with, if anything? Um, and so I think that's the key, right? Is the
Yeah.
preparation.
Well, the abundance will certainly not keep you out of the desperation mode.
Yep.
Now, how about that win rate? How have you increased it to 40? Is it by highly profiling the people who are most likely to buy?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, you look at a number of different factors, right? So in our industry, we've got a couple of big players that are pretty dominant. And so you look at and also the competitors that we've had, although probably don't have the sophistication of the solutions that we have, they've done a great job, like, marketing and creating long-term relationships, to the point where, like, you know, Sister Mary in the business office of a school has just worked for company, worked with them for so long. It's like, I don't care what you say, Nathan. I'm not leaving Nancy at the company. Like that, I've known her for 20 years, right? So it's a matter of, like, um, really looking for those targets, and then also just leveraging the relationships that you have. Hey, Steve, I know you've been having a lot of success with your, inbound applications. Would you mind, anybody else in your network, kind of, do you feel bad? Like, are you like Steve down the street? Like, does Steve need some help? You know what I mean? And so leveraging that network, providing not just name droppers, but social proofing, like, hey, schools come to us for this. I don't know your world. And so I don't know the challenges. If we could have maybe 15, 20 minutes just to get acquainted, worst case, we made a new friend.
Yeah.
Best case, maybe we identified a reason to continue the conversation. And there's no guarantee of that. But if you've got 15 or 20 minutes, I'd love to hear how things went, particularly last year with COVID. Were there challenges? that you uncovered that you may not have. Change happened everywhere, whether we liked it or not, right?
Yeah.
And so I think also the close rate comes into effect when you can really be upfront about, like I called it, empathy-based sales, but it's also reality-based sales, right?
Right. Yeah.
Am I just going to
It
try
would
to
be
get this guy,
fancy. Yeah.
right? Like, am I just trying to get this guy into my pipeline, or is there a real, opportunity for this? So leveraging the relationships, looking for good opportunities with gaps, and then just being natural and just not pressuring folks into a conversation, but just being like, hey, does it make sense for us to talk? I don't know whether it does, but at the minimum, we'll make a new friend.
Yeah.
And people like that. They're like, yeah, you know what? And I say, listen, I've seen a ton of schools. If I have anything to share with you while we're talking, like, I'd love to like give you some perspective on what I'm seeing. And, sometimes schools feel like they're out on an island alone, right? And they just don't, they talk to some of their colleagues, but some of their colleagues are competitors. So at that point, they're kind of looking for a sounding board, particularly when COVID hit. We stopped selling for 12 months. We were just helping.
Yeah.
We were out there helping. You know what? We hit our year. And so we look back on that and we're like, wow, when we position ourselves as helpers and not just salespeople, we actually do a lot of sales, right?
Cool. Hey, Nathan, it's been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn. So, and then you can, definitely, find me on the school admin, company website. I think I'm Nathan.Foreman at LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you can shoot me an email if you have any other questions. Nathan.Foreman, that's Foreman @finalsite.com.